so that we begin our function this afternoon. Our chief guest for this function this afternoon, Honorable Yusuf Hassan, Mheshimiwa, my very good friend. Welcome to the University of Nairobi. This is where I operate. When we meet out there, this is my operation base. Now I have home ground advantage. So welcome, Mheshimiwa, to the University of Nairobi. The ambassador of Venezuela, who is going to be with us here shortly, Excellence Moravia Hansanda, in absentia, but she's going to be here just in a moment. Governor Deritu, Mheshimiwa. Yeah, welcome to the University of Nairobi, former governor of Laikipia. I said earlier to my friends that once governor, always governor. So Mheshimiwa, welcome. We want also to acknowledge our dean, Professor Chako Dhiambo is my boss here in the university. Prof, welcome, and he's going to be with us just in a moment to welcome us to his home. And my colleague, Jennifer Mushiri, our associate dean in charge of undergraduate students. Professor Ngodho Karaoke, our father over there. Yeah, he's at the back. Those who are looking, it's right at the back. Professor Ngodho Karaoke is actually in some way a member of this university. He once was here, moved around these hallowed corridors of the University of Nairobi as a crusader for a better society. And Prof, we welcome you one more time to the place you once called home. And your spirit is still here. And you can see it continuing. Dr. Gona, my very good friend, my good brother, my senior brother, and members of his family. I saw my very good friend and sister Judy somewhere. There she is. Welcome to this function. Colleagues from other universities, I saw Professor Brian Koba from Memphis in the United States. There he is. Colleagues from the Department of History and Archaeology, colleagues from the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, colleagues from other faculties in the University of Nairobi, our esteemed students. I saw many of them here, both from our department and the university in general. Esteemed invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, Jambo. Good afternoon. My name is Kenneth Ombongi, and this afternoon I wear two hats in this function. The first hat is that I'm going to be the MC and at least the key guy in this function this afternoon in that aspect. So if you have any problem, please come and see me. If you want us to talk behind the tent, please let me know. Secondly, I wear the hat of being the Associate Dean in charge of research and postgraduate students in our Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences. And that is the main reason why I had to be the MC of this function, because what we are going to do here this afternoon directly falls within the purview of what I do at the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences. Friends, mine is just simple. One, to welcome you to the University of Nairobi. And two, to say today is really a great day, not just for Dr. Gona and his family and his friends, but also for the Department of History and Archaeology here in the University of Nairobi. A few years back, Dr. Gona and I got together and said, we need to find a way of
of
reviving
reviving
scholarship
scholarship
and
and
discourse
discourse
in
in
our
our
department,
department,
the department that
department that
was
was
once
once
very
very
vibrant
vibrant.
in terms of scholarly discourse. That's about 4 or 5 years back. We started and we said we want to do it in different ways. One, create a forum for people to come here to the university and have the discourse that the university once upon a time used to be known for. Two, to open up the corridors of the Department of History and Archaeology and to begin interfacing and engaging with the public in ways that demystify scholarship and the academy generally. And three, to encourage research in different aspects of historical discourse. And I'm glad that today we are here to celebrate one of the products that have been brought forth by none other than Dr. Gona himself. Dr. Gona has just taken over from me as the chair of the Department of History and Archaeology. And when we spoke or discussed about 5 years ago, we said, Doc, we will lead from the front. And Dr. Gona, this is actual leading from the front, and we thank you very much. Our chief guests of chief guests, our mother, Mama Wahu, thank you very much. We will have a chance to talk about you more. That's why I deliberately left you out of the acknowledgement. It was deliberate. So friends, we have our boss here, Professor Jack Odhiambo, who is the Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, the largest faculty of the University of Nairobi, with the upwards of 12,000 students, 260 members of faculty. On our own, we are actually a university within the university. So when you see Professor Odhiambo is in a sense, running a university within the University of Nairobi. So Prof, with a lot of humility, it is now my pleasure to welcome you, to welcome people to your home, sir.
So good afternoon, Honorable MP, former governor, Professor at the back there, and Wahu. The associate dean has told me you know the family, so she has told me a lot about you. Professor Dr. Mbongi, associate dean research, Professor Mushiri, associate dean undergraduate, Dr. Gona, chair and also author, and all members of staff and guests. I think it's a great honor for the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences and the Department of History and Archaeology that a senior member of staff there has done some work of research and has written a book which today we are going to launch. This is a great honor for us. I know that it has a lot to do with the politics of our country, and that is very important because history, of course, has to reflect politics. And I can see the professor at the back there. They were together with my uncle at some point in some place, which can be explained later, but they also struggled in the same battle, we can say. So I wish to welcome everyone, and may I give the opportunity then to the MC to continue. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Odhiambo, for those very kind thoughts. And we are now free. After Professor has spoken and welcomed us, we are free and very much at home. Thank you, Prof. We appreciate your leadership within this important faculty of the University of Nairobi. Now, friends, there are those of us who are online. I especially welcome you, our online audience. We apologize, we started a few minutes late. This is because of fairly unavoidable circumstances on our end, but I want to believe that we are forgiven. Now, the book we are going to launch today is entitled Spirited. I want to invite my colleague and good friend and fellow Associate Dean, Professor Jennifer Mushiri, to just tell us, what is this about Spirited? Very briefly, Prof, just share with us some kind of information that will give us a background of what we are launching. Thank you.
Thank you. Our chief guest, Honorable Yusuf Hassan, Governor Nderitu Muriithi. Ken has said that once a governor, always a governor. Yes, our Dean, Professor Joko Thiambo of the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, my fellow Associate Dean, Dr. Kenneth Mbongi, the Chair, Department of History and Archaeology, Dr. George Gona, who is our host this afternoon, and the writer of the book that we are launching today, and other chairs present, Mrs. Wahu Kaara, the subject of Spirited and your family, my colleagues in the University of Nairobi and other institutions, our students, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Let me begin by congratulating you, Dr. Gona, for this great achievement. Writing a biography is no easy task. You need to conduct intensive and meticulous research, sift through thousands of memories, speak to dozens of people, be very intentional and cautious as you deal with the subject, and eventually put together a logical story to give your readers. It calls for work, diligence, commitment, and you have done it. We are truly proud of you. I'm greatly honored to speak at this event today for a number of reasons, but I will highlight only two. The first reason is that Dr. George Gona was my teacher in undergrad, and he knows my interest in the subject of life writing. When he asked me if I could share my thoughts about the biography, I immediately said yes, without hesitation. Why? Because when your teacher asks you to do something, you do not even think about it. You do not ask questions. You follow the Nike slogan, just do it. In addition, life writing is a big part of my academic work, and it is therefore always fascinating to get to engage in this area of research and participate in conversations on the subject. The second reason, because I'm a student of literature, and this afternoon we are hosted by historians, I will tell it to you through a short story that borrows from history, but also contextualizes the biography that we are launching this afternoon. The subject of this biography, Mrs. Wahu Kaara, and the story of her life have a very special connection with my own life and that of my family. At the height of Moi's insecurities and his obsessive hunt for people he considered dissidents, that's members of the Mwakenya movement, something happened that would change the lives of Wahus and many other families, a number of them represented in this room today. 39 years ago, in November of 1985, a young man died, leaving behind a young widow and 3 young children. I say young because he was just about 34 years old. Soon after his burial, his friends, many of them members of the underground movement of the time, came together to plan for a fundraiser to raise school fees for their comrades' children. This is what friends do, right? One of the operatives drew up a list of about 40 of their friends as they planned to send out invites for the fundraising event. Unfortunately, it happened that this operative was having domestic problems, and the wife got a chance to fix him. to set him up. In January of 1986, she took that list directly to President Moi, claiming that those were the names of the members of Mwakenya. The list was undoubtedly considered authentic because it came from the wife of an operative. Following that betrayal, the movement was thoroughly exposed, and what followed were callous arrests, detention, jail, forced exile, devastated families, and so on. Mind you, the hunt affected even people who were not members of the underground movement. Kaara's name, Wahu's husband, was on that list. Professor Ngodho Kariuki, up there, his elder brother, was also on that list. So were others who some are here today or are represented by their families. Now, it so happens that the man who died was my father, Joe Muchiri. And the children whose school fees these gentlemen on that list wanted to raise were my sister, my brother, and me. It's therefore a very special honor that I get to share this afternoon and this space with people who were a very big part of my father's life, who actually knew him for much longer than I did, and who, unfortunately, in their efforts to honor him by assisting his wife and children, found themselves facing Moi's wrath. As you will read in Wahu's story, their lives would never be the same again. Now, what are my reflections on Spirited? Now, the beauty of speaking at a book launch is that you get to teach the audience about the text without divulging too much, because then they would not buy the text and read it, and Mwalimu needs to make some sales. I will therefore only share a few thoughts on the story so that I allow each one of us a chance to read the book and make our own evaluation of it. The biographer tells us that Spirited, which is an authorized biography, is part of a project on stories on Kenyan women in public spaces. Indeed, the story demonstrates that the same struggles that women faced as they tried to occupy public space in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s still persist in 2024. The overriding motive in this biography is about women in the struggle for freedom, and the words that need to guide us as we interact with the story are, lest we forget. It is a story that reminds us of where we have come from in the context of the struggle and the place of women as key players in this movement. We need to be reminded, lest we forget, that despite there not being too many published narratives about women's participation in the struggle for a better Kenya, they have always been involved in the struggle since the colonial times. Figures such as Mekatilili, Nyanjiru, Syokimau were pioneers in the colonial times, handing over the baton to others over the years. During the Kenya's War of Independence, there is historical evidence that women were astute participants as couriers of arms, messages, food, medicine, and protectors of the fighters whenever necessary. They kept families together as their sons and husbands fought the colonizer in the forests. The role of women in the struggle did not end with independence. They have been consistent in the post-colonial resistance movement over the years. Were there women in the underground movement of the 80s and 90s? This biography answers that question with a resounding yes. The writing of this biography underscores the power of stories and storytelling. Stories need to be told, for what are we without our stories? The Wahu that we meet in the story and in person is a product of her lived experiences. History and stories cannot be divorced, and this story is a very important part of the archive on Kenya's history. It contributes to the archive of memories on Kenya and our nationhood, and the consistent resistance against injustice and the struggle for a true liberation. Born on 16th October 1952, just 4 days before the declaration of the state of emergency, Wahu's story runs parallel to the colonial and post-colonial history of our country. She's a true child of the struggle. It is interesting that she was born in the African Medical Hospital in Eldoret, the only hospital for Africans in the town, because it means that she was born, as all Kenyan children of the time, already discriminated against. As if the season and circumstances of her birth destined her to take up the struggle, she has been at the center of the struggle for justice, liberation, and a better society since she was a child. Throughout Wahu's story, we see the intersection of Kenya's history and her story. That the biographer is a historian is also an important factor in the delivery of the story because he's able to give us the personal while ensuring fidelity to history. Through Spirited, the personal is nationalized and the individual collectivized. Wahu's biography is an apt reminder that we cannot afford to forget or ignore our history. That would be dangerous, suicidal even. We cannot know who we are or who we need to be if we do not know or understand our origins. We cannot purport to know where we need to go if we do not know where we have come from. Our history, our lived experiences form the sum total of our identity as individuals and as a nation or a people. And this story demonstrates that fact quite critically. The spaces that the subject has occupied and the places that she has been to over the years are notable fields of her identity formation. Whether it's in the Rift Valley where she was born and raised, or Nairobi where she schooled and later worked and still lives, or Muranga where she got married and taught for many years, Wahu's movement in these spaces form part of her story and influence who she is and how she views the world. She grew up seeing a people exploited by imperialism. She would later notice class divisions and struggles occasioned by capitalism and senseless amassing of material possessions. Whether in school, at home, or at university, she was very consistent in her position against injustice and the desire for a better society. Indeed, we see a very authentic young Wahu who is not afraid to call out her own father for what she terms primitive accumulation of wealth because it ironically destroys their family. At one time, she leads a strike. How dare you? She leads a strike on her father's farm, protesting against her father's exploitation of his own children to get cheap labor. It takes such grace and honesty to criticize one's father. In school, she not only fights to get a special diet for students who need it, but is able to bring together different categories of students, thus promoting cohesion, inclusivity, and integration. As a university student, we see her standing up to male bullies. As a young university student in the mid-70s, her world expands and she begins to understand what injustice really is, particularly at the national level. Her story highlights the role of university students in challenging status quo, be it with regard to the change in the university funding model of 1974, the assassination of J.M. Kariuki in 1975, or the harassment of student union leaders and banning of students' union meetings by the ruling regime. It is therefore very consistent with Wahu's character that she would start dating Kaara, a fellow student and a very active political operative in college. The two came from very different backgrounds, and the author, the biographer, writes that in this relationship, two different worlds came to meet. Kaara, with a peasantry background, with an inclination to identifying with Mau Mau, and Wahu, the daughter of a wealthy Eldoret businessman. Yet, that is what Wahu is. That is who she is. She sees not what one has, but who they are, human. It is Kaara who largely introduces her to the students' underground movement, and together with other progressives of the time, they begin to question the betrayal of the liberation cause by the Kenyatta government. It's remarkable that at that moment, at Kenyatta University College, she was the only woman in an all-male underground project. Her story not only reminds us, but also pays tribute to those early Kenyan academics who, in their revolutionary thinking and manners, played a critical role in raising the social political consciousness of their students. Maina Wakinyati, Wachira Kamonji, Mulomo, and others were mentioned in the story. Away from home, the university lecture hall became another field of formation of identity for Wahu. In those years, liberation and freedom was a global concern and therefore an important matter for Wahu and her group of progressives. They were certainly not short of inspiration from across the world. Her memories of the university students' leaders in keeping the ruling class in check pushes us, albeit probably unintentionally, to compare the then leaders to student leaders today. The student leadership then clearly had a sense of purpose, responsibility, and was genuinely interested in changing the nation. Why are things so different today? What happened? What could have gone so wrong? We have seen in recent years student leadership increasingly marked by violence and dishonesty. Although Kenya had become independent, Kenyans had quickly realized that economic liberation was yet to be achieved. The ruling class was in a race to accumulate wealth as quickly as it could. and it did not care who got hurt in the process. Wahu could see the capitalist exploitation exhibited by her father back home play out on the national stage. She was able to critically see and question how Kenya was evolving, and clearly the country was far from achieving liberation and democracy. For the country to be truly liberated and democratic, imperialism had to die. I would argue that Wahu's greatest contribution to the struggle, away from heightened political debates and activities in the underground movement, was in the classroom as a teacher. Throughout her teaching career, she was very intentional about the profession being a call to serve, to create a better world. She desired to listen, to help, and inspire. And the testimonies from her former students are evidence of her impact on the thousands of young students that she taught and mentored. Her value system, steeped in justice, discipline, respect for self and others, and a sense of purpose, cuts across all spheres of her life. Through the story of her experiences, we are reminded of the place of a teacher as a role model in society. Yet, it is during this most defining season of Wahu's life that she faces the most trying experiences as a teacher, a mother, a wife, and a political operative. This was the period of the anti-KANU rule resistance, and she, her husband, family members, and friends were deeply involved with the underground movement. The group, with operatives around the country, were calling for an independent country and an economy that was owned by the people. Interestingly, Wahu did not follow the arguments of her comrades, including her husband, blindingly, and she was fiercely independent. For instance, her view of the strategy for liberation did not necessarily involve an insurrection, as happened in the August 1982 coup d'etat. In her view, which was opposed to that of some of her comrades, the revolution was not ready. It needed to be well thought out, it needed to be planned and sustainable. In her true element, it's not surprising that she did not agree with her fellow progressives on the Matiba candidacy in 1992. Neither was she swayed by the Kibaki Tosha euphoria of 2002. And her true definition of revolution is that it's about dealing with ordinary dynamics of life and including asking very fundamental questions about life. And it is such questions that define her understanding of a revolution and guided her as she taught while still serving as an operative. She was cautious, even when she thought that Kaara and the others were being a bit reckless, especially when they held what was supposed to be secret movement discussions in bars, which, ironically, while being unsafe spaces, were also fertile grounds for recruiting members to the underground. This was in the 80s, times of great tension and immense fear among Kenyans as the government of the day seriously cracked down on the so-called dissidents. People were ostracized. Some dropped their names in fear. Marriages were broken. Others lost jobs. But Wahu was not afraid of being associated with her husband or the others in the movement. After the infamous list of January 1986, her husband and many of their friends were now marked by the Moi regime, and it was just a matter of time before they were arrested and detained for sedition, including Professor Ngodho, Kaara's brother, while others like Kaara himself fled to exile. A list that was meant for good turned the lives of individuals and families upside down forever. Even at the time, Wahu continued to teach with dignity and responsibility, a remarkable achievement because it took quite a bit of time before she was declared a threat to state security and kicked out of Nginda girls in a very undignifying manner. She would then be tossed from school to school before she finally settled in Nairobi. Her story allows us to see the effects of Moi's dictatorship at a personal level through Wahu's experiences: a husband in exile, a brother-in-law in detention, police harassment, incessant questions by her children about the whereabouts of their father, financial stress, tension among her staff, destabilization of her teaching career, homelessness, and the list continues. Being a teacher and a member of the underground, which was opposed to the very government that she worked for, challenging us to reflect on the ethical dilemmas that always surround such struggles. We see her as a mother trying to raise young children with the uncertainty that comes with being branded the wife to a dissident, a husband in exile living in very poor conditions, and a society that does not understand why she does what she does. Yet, The very act of standing with her husband and other comrades is a true mark of resistance. Her unyielding faith in staying the course of the revolution, despite the pain and suffering of her children, is part of what defines her spiritedness. She refuses to be cowed by state functionaries who try to push her to renounce her husband. We see her selfless nature when, despite her husband being in exile, she joins the wives and mothers of political prisoners who defied Nyaoism and put up a spirited demonstration and went on a hunger strike, calling for the release of their sons and husbands in early 1992. Wahu also reminds us of the great role played by the church then, as the clergy spoke fearlessly against state oppression, a provocation for us to evaluate the nature of the church today. Unfortunately, highly compromised, silent when it truly matters, absent when the nation needs it. In this story, we see the scars that Wahu bears from the struggle as a Kenyan, a teacher, a woman, a wife, and a mother. She was not afraid to own up to her and her comrades' role in the struggle of the 80s and 90s, and they paid the ultimate price. We see the sacrifice of a mother who had to cut short some of her aspirations, such as the pursuit of a postgraduate degree in Sweden, to take care of her children. We also see a woman who is not afraid to walk the talk in search for a better society, be it in the classroom, at home, in the civil society, or in the public political space. Her experience on the campaign trail in 2002 and 2007 demonstrate just how difficult women find it to compete with men for public office. So, what lessons can we take from Spirited? Does the exploitation, dictatorship, or greed that Wahu and her comrades resisted in the 70s, 80s, and 90s continue today? Does it? Sure, it does. Does the primitive accumulation of wealth, power, and privilege still exist today? Yes, and it has probably become worse because the eating class has expanded. 40 years since Wahu's husband and other patriots paid dearly in their search for a better nation, we have come full circle. Back to the fear, intimidation, detention, and abuse of power. As a student of literature, the ruling elite of the 80s and today remind me of two characters from two famous short stories. The character of Tekayo in Grace Ogott's short story by the same title, and the character of Pahom in Leo Tolstoy's How Much Land Does a Man Need? Tekayo's insane obsession with a particular type of liver leads him to eventually kill and eat his own grandchildren, while Pahom's excessive desire to accumulate and literally runs him to the ground, dead. Greed for power, wealth, control corrodes the human soul. It consumes both the greedy party and those around them. Dictatorship is a product of greed. The dictator does not care who gets hurt by their actions. Is resistance necessary? Yes. Continuous resistance against injustice, deception, exploitation, fight for justice, freedom, and dignity is absolutely necessary in any society. It's the only way that a society can change or grow. We therefore need to be spirited in order to resist. From this story, what would it mean to be spirited? It's to be passionate about a cause. It's to be energized. It's to be willing to go against the grain. It's to be convinced about a project. Political, economic, cultural, gender, class, and all forms of liberation have to begin with mental liberation. In conclusion, Spirited is a personal story that humanizes the struggle and the liberation movement in Kenya. It's a story that reminds us of the need for awareness and consciousness at all levels of our lives, the personal, national, cultural, social, economic, political, and spiritual. And I sincerely hope that you'll enjoy reading Wahu's story. Asante sana.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Prof, for those wonderful thoughts. As Professor Mushiri spoke, one of our guests the ambassador of Venezuela, Her Excellency Moravia Hensanda, I hope I pronounced that well, joined us. Her Excellency, welcome to the University of Nairobi. We are happy and glad to have you here this afternoon. This is where things happen. Things academic, things discourse like this. We have just started. Also in our midst, we have Reverend Gladys Mwangi from the Presbyterian Church of East Africa. Reverend, where are you? Yes. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to have you here. We'll be asking you at some stage to connect us with the power that is beyond this life, now and the here. So for now, you are very welcome to the university. We also have our colleague, the registrar from the Presbyterian University of East Africa, Reverend Dr. Isaka Kibara. Where are you, sir? Yeah, there you are. Thank you. Welcome, our colleague from the Presbyterian University. Friends, as Professor Mushiri spoke, I realized what the spirit behind the spirited is. I don't know about you, but for me, I began to realize that there is a spirit behind the spirited. Yes. And Professor Mushiri just told us that Mama Wahu was born into a struggle. She lived in the struggle and then became an embodiment of that struggle. You know, scholars, we have this tendency of providing a very complex tapestry of what life is. And I think that is what Professor Mushiri has done. But I know that there are people who are not into that. And these are friends who say it as it is. And at this point, before we go to the center of what our presentations will be this afternoon, I just want to ask two friends of Mama Wahu to just come and tell us the way it is, away from that scholarly exposé that we have heard from Professor Mushiri. You know, friends are so much part of one's life, you know, and they partially become actually the story of Madame. So let me begin by bringing Mr. Kipashia Gatu, who is a close friend, to tell us something, and thereafter I will bring Madame Rebecca Ruhara also to tell us something briefly as we move in this program.
Greetings everyone. Habari za leo. Situchangamke. Mgeni mheshimiwa. MP, Wahu Kaara, ambassador, and the family of Mrs. Kaara, and also Professor Gona, who has made it possible for us to be here, and all the members who have come because of this great event. My name is Kivashia Gato, and I have known Wahu for about only 50 years, and still going. Even before she was married, I knew her. And she was my classmate in the university. The last time we visited this place officially, Professor, was 50 years ago when we were members of Nairobi University. When we were coming in, tulikuta wengine tukasema nini, comrade power, overdue 50 years. So I have known the Mrs. Kaara Wahu, we call her Mama Shiko. I've known her family. Her husband was my best man. And so we have walked a long way, not only as a family, as friends, but also as intellectual adventurers, as well as spiritual walk. We have walked together, and we have also done revolutionary walks and adventures as well. Sounds peculiar, but it is the fact that we have walked along those 50 years with some other colleagues who are here, a journey that was really, as the MC says, that which is spirited was spirited, it has a spirit behind it. And today's Wahu is of a greater understanding of the spirit around her probably than she was those 50 years ago. Because now she sees the spirit that drives whatever happens because of her revelation as a Christian. There is a song that Kikuyu children know when they were young. They used to sing. It's a song that is interesting because it kind of throws the challenge to each child, and that is what really Wahu is. Wahu, roga mutaro, no shokanerie, bebe negoro, sianya githigo. Si mnaijua hiyo? Nani anajua hiyo wimbo? Kwa tunaimba tukiwa wadogo. Inaenda namna gani? Wahu, roga mutaro, no shokanerie, bebe negoro, sianyagi. Wahu. The name Wahu in this case is the children challenging each other, daring each other. Go jump across the trench, jump across the valley, and go and seek the maize. It's already ready, the harvest. Go and look for the harvest. The harvest is ready. And they are using the Wahu because the word Wahu comes from Nyakehu, which is also part of the story here. Nyakehu or Wakehu. You've heard women, Kikuyu women called Wahu, Nyakehu. You've heard those names. That one, that who is pregnant. You know, that is ready, a pregnancy that we are expecting, and we don't know what is going to come out of it. But that is really what Wahu is, even in the family. She's always there, and sometimes comes out with a statement, an explosion that sometimes confuses everybody. And sometimes, these days, she has gone a little bit more quiet. Kiama? She has mellowed by the years. There's a time she had totally an inconvenient conscience. If it comes into her mind and she wants to tell you, you have got a green cabbage in your teeth, she will not say it quietly. You just say it openly. She always has had that. And that's what Professor Mushiri was talking. There was something about this spirit. She's almost as if Wahu had been carried a pregnancy that was waiting and waiting and waiting to be delivered. And I'm not saying that that pregnancy is this book, because I think there's still much more. But that is the character and the spirit of Wahu. She's always there, intimately relating with each other, with us, with everybody. She's got good friends. She knows how to keep friends. We have been friends for 50 years, in spite of her husband having left us in this world. But because we have a friendship, and she values that relationship, human relationship. And that is why this song, Wahu, for me, it makes a lot of sense. It was not her who made it, but the one who did it was actually challenging us to go out there, to go and cross the valley and get the harvest. And that's what actually she has been daring. This is the character of Wahu, which is from the childhood. She dared to cross even the trenches that are created by others to go and reach out for the harvest and to give it to others. Wahu is of course, still energetic, and we still like that, her energy. And today she has become looking for more and more understanding about her spiritual existence. One of the very interesting things she says in one of her statements is that I will not die for Africa. Lakini wajua kuna watu wengi sana wanasema hivyo, nitakufa hata nitakufia Afrika, nitakufia Kenya. Na hiyo watu wanasema ati I'm ready to die even for Kenya or even for Africa. So she made a statement at one time in a forum, and this gives you an idea of the internal dynamics of Wahu. And she said, I'm not ready to die for Africa, but I'm ready to live for Africa. Dying might be very easy, but living for a purpose, and to reach that fruit, to reach that harvest for the purpose, for the benefit of all, for others, is a much greater challenge. And that thing, I think that comes out in her story here, that she has always wanted out to make, to perfect, to not only in her words and speeches, but in her life practically. And this is why I think when she was a headmistress and the students she was heading a girls' school, even today they still remember the practical messages that she taught them about 40 years ago. And that is Wahu. Very practical, at the same time, very intellectually gifted by God, very spiritual, because even now, her testimony as a Christian, we know and we have interacted with her in our church. And for that, that is what I think Wahu is. But there's one thing that Wahu also is that we have not mentioned. Ah, Gemishu magana koe, gemishu magana mushe, gemi. She also loves her culture as a culture of liberation, not the Kikuyu culture I'm talking about, the culture that liberates. And that is her struggle. And that is her spirit. And I can tell you, she also has many people who do not understand her. Very many. In as much as there are some who understand and love her for what she is. And I think the family who is here, they can attest to those challenges, to those wonderful ideas, to those interesting connections that he has. And for us, this word, spirit, for me, the title that there's a spirited person, the spirited struggle, it's a spirited journey. And that journey is what she is telling us to walk with her. And it is born out of God's gift. It is not a choice for her. It is how God made her. Thank you very much.
Hands together one more time for Kibachia. Thank you very, very much, Mzee Kibachia. Only 50 years ago. Don't ask me where I was those 50 years ago. Mzee Kibachia has really delved into what I see as archives of knowledge of Mama Wahu's life and times from a very personal perspective. Those anecdotes were quite rich. That eyewitness account, very, very rich. And we can begin now to much more clearly see the spirit behind the spirited, very disruptive spirit that shakes the status quo. Thank you, Mzee. Now, let's hear it from another perspective. Madam Rebecca Ruhara, please. let's hear it from that perspective.
Hamjambo. Allow me to speak in Swahili. Thank you. Wahu ni dadangu. All protocols observed, eh? Wahu dadangu, she's a friend. And I think she's the only person who understands me. Because mambo ya Wahu na yangu ni kama sawa. Na nimefikiria sana leo nikasikia alianza riot shule. And so did I. Nilianza huko Miririki na sikujua riot inaanzwaje. What I know, Wahu is very strong. Ukimwendea ukiwa na problem, it looks like hasikii, anakuangalia tu. But once Wahu amefungua mdomo, anakuanga na mambo mazuri sana. She always asks me, Rebecca, si tuliagree tukutane kwa msalaba. Sasa unajalishwa na nini? Wahu is very strong. Wahu is very kind. Wahu is a good listener. Kama kuna mtu amenishikilia kwa safari niliyokuwa nayo, ni dada Wahu. Saa ingine nakujanga, ananiambia tuliambianaje. And when she's up there, manake kuna siku atatoa hizo, namwambianga hatuna vita sio? And she's very fast in knowing umemwambiaje, so she'll calm down. Lakini if you listen to her, hajui kutoa maneno, lakini wakati atakwambia advice yake, please take it. She's a good person. Na Wahu ni mmoja wao, if she had 100 shillings, acha niongee kidogo, nakwambia Wahu atakupa aende miguu. That's the kind of a person she is. Na hajaliangi what will happen. Wewe kuja na shida zako, utampata. The other thing, ana upendo mwingi. Kitu hafanyi, haezi lia. Lakini kimsukuma sana, utaona tu machozi tu kwa mbali. Alafu atakupa shida. Atakwambia muombe huyo mtu. And she means it. Wahu mimi sijawahi muona nikimuuliza kitu na hana jawabu langu. And for that matter, thank you. About mambo ya masomo, mimi sikusoma hiyo. Tulisoma ya kitabu cha Mungu. We've shared a lot. I've gone to her place severally. Tunapiga magoti, we really pray. That's Wahu for you. Lakini hili jambo linanisitisha. What is spirited? Spirited kwa Kiswahili ni nini? Ni yako kakitu Kale. Ni kiodu. Hako kakitu unasikianga wakati unahurumia mtu. Wakati unataka kusaidia. I also have it. The only thing I'll tell Wahu, when I grow up, hata mimi nitaandika kitabu. Thank you.
Let's one more time put our hands together for Mama Rebecca. I didn't realize that I needed to be a translator of this, but for those who missed a few Kiswahili words, Mama Rebecca was saying, Wahu is my sister. Wonderful person, strong lady, kind, good-hearted, a good listener, but he also can be very explosive. That is what she said. But she also said that finally, that she will also want to write a book someday in her life. So thank you very much, Asante sana Mami, for coming to join us, and God bless you. Thank you. Now, friends, very quickly, we have gotten into that point when we want to test the spirit a little bit. I want to very kindly invite Mama Wahu to come and just say something. Tupe kionjo tu. Just kionjo. Something small. And then we can listen to our keynote speaker.
All protocol observed. Allow me to just acknowledge my very special guests, my grandchildren, and my nephew. You stand. My grandchildren and my nephew Maura. That is how history is made. You are being here, you will forever be in records that at one time you came to the University of Nairobi, at the ages you have come, and you listened to what your grandmother is, and you wonder whether really that is your grandmother. Thank you. And your auntie, well seated. Sasa mwalimu unaniuliza kionjo. You ask me for kionjo. Vionjo ni vingi lakini kwa leo nimepatikana. I don't know how to be now myself, but I will still continue to be. In this room, there are people who have never heard me talk, and they have come. So I even don't know how to censor myself or to be myself. They know themselves. But allow me just to be myself the way Mwalimu has asked me. Yes, spirited, the life of Wahu Kaara. See, here I am. Sitaki kufichwa na hii desk. Sijui kama nitainterfere na hiyo mtambo. Ili mnione mimi ni mrefu na mrembo kweli kweli. Na siku ya leo najua mnaniona. Hata mimi siogopi kwa sababu nina brother mmoja hapa mkicheza atawaangusha. Na wengine wengi. Ningependa kutaja kila mtu. Lakini sasa mmetajwa na mmekaribishwa na huku ni Nairobi University. Can you imagine, because I also know I see people I grew up with in Eldoret, we were not many coming to university. At one point, even I had to hold one of my sisters to bring her to register in the university, and her parents allowed that. So what am I saying? This life, yes, true, it had to be spirited. It could never have been anything different from that. A firstborn of 12 children, born of businesswoman and businessman who are out in the Rift Valley to guarantee themselves and see that their heritage is never snatched by the historical material time of the moment. They had to locate themselves. I got located. Do you know I slapped a white young boy when I was 7 years? Because he came to my shosho's place and decides to mess with the sitting of the old people and decides to break the calabash of Muratina. So I just got a hold of him and told him, shame on you, have no manners. You don't see these are old people? So my uncle, everyone was frantic. They thought they would be thrown away from the settlers' farm. Kwa sababu my ushags kulikuwa kwa boas, the boas, are they boas or whatever, makaburu kutoka South Africa. If you want to know Eldoret, Wasunigishu, huko nilizaliwa, na I'm very proud. It is because you had to be spirited. Little did I know Kenyan history would give me an opportunity to demonstrate that spirit. And even now, you can see how spirited I am. So that spirit must deliver what it needs to deliver. That song my good friend Kibashi has sung, it's real. And the children will never dare to sing for me. Can you imagine? Because watakipata. So they would sing when they are very far. So all what I'm saying, this event is very memorable for me. It's very sentimental. It can also be very emotional. And this is the truism of the spirit of Kenya, the spirit of East Africa, the spirit of Africa, and the spirit of all nations. For those who believe in Christ, we know that was a promise that Abraham was given, that all nations will show that spirit. It is here in Kenya. And I'm happy because I also met another very spirited person who made me understand that I was not unique. 2005, I met Comrade late President Chavez, and I could see his vibrant spirit. And I'm happy because he really affirmed spirited people are really a gift for humanity, and they shouldn't be mean with that spirit. I am happy for what has already been observed here, and you all have come because you really know that you can attest that being a good spirit as a human being is what has been the question as we read history and as we participate in making history and as we make memories like we are making here with all of us. And as this great work by one Mwalimu George Gona and his family has been able to deliver, to affirm a simple spirit, Wahu Kaara. What can I say? What can I say? What would you say if you are the one? Because he just said, you write my book, and he wrote, and here it is, and here we are. So other things remain constant. I am only humbled, very humbled, because it's not easy to be in a sentence. But I am in pages, chapter 1, chapter 2, and not from just ati mtu amechukua kalamu. Mnajua hapa ni University of Nairobi, ama hamjui? Here, University of Nairobi, where knowledge is the business. So if you can afford to add to that business and a whole department, a whole entourage of them who know all the knowledge, like, yes, and simuliambiwa niwapatie kionjo, simumeonja, simumemuona Wahu. You have seen Wahu. I'm never afraid to be Wahu Kaara. That's my name. A Kikuyu African woman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mame. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Wow. Logo. Sing. Wow. Thank you, Mame. Thank you so much. You know, friends, those of us who were born, bred, and raised by strong women, I relate with this great lady before us today. My mother is a bit sickly now, but she is as strong as you are. Those who find me abrasive and strong, that is my mother's character. And I do not regret. We were brought up by strong women. I'm saying I was brought up by a strong woman, not because my father was not there. My father was very much there. But my mother left an indelible imprint in my character, my worldview, and way of doing things. Another spirited woman. Thank you, Mommy. You inspire me. That's why I'm standing here today. Now, Dr. Gona, if I were writing this book, I could have given it a different title, which is A Giant of the Struggle. The life and times of Wahu Kaara. Just come in a minute and tell us why you had to give it the title Spirited, different from mine, please.
Anxious. This is Wahu's Day, my day. Guest speaker, Honorable Yusuf Hassan, the Venezuela ambassador to Kenya, the Dean, Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, Governor, Professor Ngoto Kariuki, brother-in-law to Wahu, the family of Wahu, colleagues, students, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome to the University of Nairobi. I am thrilled and excited to have you all honor my invitation to take part in the launch of my book on Wahu. It is indeed a great honor to me to stand before you as we launch this book. The book on Wahu, the daughter of Maura Wamakuro and Susan Nyambura, Elizabeth Nyambura, and the tough older sister to young Jenga Makuro. I appreciate everyone for accepting my invitation. This biography has been coming and not coming. I mean, you know, we have postponed this launch twice. This is the third time we are now holding this launch. I want to say that as I completed the first phase of the research for the book, which involved conversations with Wahu, my nephew died suddenly in January 2018. This was devastating and destabilizing, to say the least. I then embarked on the second phase of the interviewing of family members, friends, former students, workmates, couple of months later. I began writing the book in 2020. So it's taken me quite some time to complete it. In between, COVID-19 disrupted routine work, that bogged down the work, that bogged down the writing. So this book has been coming long, and here we are today. Of course, I set deadlines for myself, but I was not able to meet these deadlines. In other academic jurisdictions, people take time off to concentrate on a project like this. Yet the labor of love, like my students know, behoves us to pursue knowledge, whatever the circumstances. Now, I will take a few minutes to just to express my thanks to a couple of people before I make my little remarks on who Wahu is to me, having written this book. Wambuku, I don't know if Wambuku is here. Wambuku is Wahu's close childhood friend. They actually call each other sister. Your insights into Wahu's convincing tongue and penchant for cleanness was apt. You were worried about Wahu's harsh treatment of her siblings, but as time went by, you came to realize that Wahu had to be the eldest sibling and had to do what she did. It was a pleasure to relive your early years growing up with Wahu. Mwalim George Guka, who taught Wahu in class 6 and 7. I recall we had our interview in Eldoret in my car. Other than noticing Wahu's interest in learning, you and your colleagues discovered she needed food too. Thank you for sharing with me Wahu's formative years. Nebat, I call him a clown. He's a very interesting man. This was Wahu's desk mate in primary school. He is also an admirer of Wahu par excellence, and I emphasize that. They were boogie mates. They were the champions of Eldoret in boogieing. Nebat's sense of humor during our conversation about Wahu made me enjoy every bit he shared about his friend Wahu. Nebat's stories about everything, including how Wahu would avoid a date, but then when they meet next, Wahu would still convince him that perhaps she's going to be interested the next time. Anytime I got bored writing, I would always go back to Nebat's story because he is really an entertainer. Alice Nyamu, you shared the great lessons you picked from Wahu when she was your teacher at Mugweri Girls High School. Most important, it was about how to handle yourself as a teacher. I got to feel Wahu's philosophy of making the most of what you have in every situation from your second encounter. You told me about Wahu's accepting to be a regular teacher after the transfer from Gona Girls High School. To the Gona Girls, I think some of you are here. Thanks for allowing me to barge into your afternoon with Wahu at home in Matasia. That was your day to enjoy your moment with her, but you afforded me a chance to meet you, or to meet with you. And those who accepted to dialogue with me over their teacher, I am immensely indebted to your memories of her. These memories of Mrs. Kaara enrich the process of writing this biography. I admire each of you for the special regard you have for her, and for those who found it difficult to afford me an interview because of the bad experiences with her, I hope this story will speak to you in a different light. Reverend Theuri, your eye for Wahu's capabilities to run a school like Nginda were rewarded by her delivery when she moved to that school as the headmistress. Your intervention to find out why Mrs. Kaara was relieved of her position as headmistress and transferred was revealing of the circumstances Wahu was living in, a repressed and an endangered woman. Kibashia, we spent many hours at your home and in your library. You share a passion for social justice and search for human dignity with Wahu. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences with her and for reading the manuscript and providing invaluable suggestions. You also volunteered your time to scrutinize the presentation of the final product that we launched today. Chitechi, Wahu has been friends with you for a while. It is out of your friendship that you appreciated her as an individual who will take a position against an imperialist world system, whose representative was the Moi regime. You regard Wahu as an underground operative on her own right. You and Kibashia stand out as long-term beacons of undying friendship. It has been a privilege to know you. General Waruiru, you shared with me the intricate stories of Kaara and Wahu, particularly that story about you facilitating Kaara's unexpected visit home in 1988 from exile in Tanzania. Mike was not expecting that, but abruptly he saw you at the window asking to be opened the door. Many of these stories you get from the book. Professor Yugi, you availed yourself when I reached out. You took time to read the manuscript and you wrote a foreword for the book. I feel honored that you accepted to do so. Your insights into Wahu's early critical college days informed my framing of Wahu's association with left-leaning thinking. You introduced Wahu to social movements, and thanks to your mentorship, Wahu is an icon in this space. Thanks so much. Mama Flora, you made our interview space and benches in the Mabati shelter at Mtero PCA Church conducive for intense conversation with Wahu. The hot chocolate you made on Mondays and Fridays for the entire 12 months I had in conversation with Wahu and the others I interviewed kept us going. Thank you very much. Wahu's friends at Mtero, Rebecca, Barine, Mrs. Mureithi, you do not just admire Wahu's capabilities and energy to push for the welfare of women, you also pointed out her flaws that few of those I talked to could raise. Thank you. Wambui, as Mary Wambui, Wahu's lady of honor, you regard Wahu as more of your sister than a friend. Your reflections on the times you shared in Eldoret and Wahu choosing you as your best maid in her wedding speaks volumes of her regard for you. I thank you for telling your story about your interactions with Wahu. Mzee Waweru Gethe, who has since died, you found in Wahu the missing link in the Spring People's Restoration Council and valued her input in progressing the agenda of the council. Thank you. I also spoke to Wahu's children for this book. Wanjiku, aka Mkozi, your critical mind is true to your nickname. Thanks for making me understand your mother's struggles in life. It was worth waiting to speak to you. It took Uncle Mike to convince you to speak to me. Kiama, I sincerely appreciate your hospitality when I came to Nanyuki to converse with you about your mother. Other than the long interviews I had with Wahu, our marathon 5-hour conversation was the longest among those I had the opportunities to talk to during my research. I think I now have the liberty to mention it to Wahu that you kept me for a day and a half at the sports club, patiently waiting for you. Your action reminded me of the old dictum in doing research, the importance of patience in seeking information as one does research. If I told your mother that time, you know what she would have done to you. However, you made me appreciate Wahu's effort at keeping her children in school in the absence of your father, who was in exile. Working with her at Kendren was true testimony to the famous adage that the apple does not fall far from the tree. Maura, Mrs. Kaara's political campaign manager, you have a knack to understand your mother's sense of discipline. Your reflections on her struggles with new paradigms in social development work made me appreciate the dilemmas she found herself in. You at times were present when I visited her in Matasa to give briefs on the progress in the writing this paragraph. Thank you very much for your input. Ngotho, aka Vladimir, you made time for me. Advocates of High Court are busy people. From you, I learned how it felt like for a child anticipating the return of his father from exile and the hopes and disappointments therein. Your stories about Maura make me laugh until this day. Uncle Mike, I met you for the first time in January 2018. I had already heard quite a bit about you from Wahu. Wahu calls you the sweet soul of hers. The 3 long conversations we had at Parklands Club brought to light how Wahu's approach to life shaped you and your siblings' perceptions about life, and how Wahu became the fulcrum of the Makuru family. Your bond with Wahu is demonstrated in this book. It's a remarkable between a sister and a brother. Uncle Njenga, you shared with me a lot about your tough, no-nonsense elder sister, Wahu. You told me that she is the family's history book. Thanks for your hospitality while I visited Eldoret to speak to people and on my way to meet with Chitechi in Tarbo. Beth, during Wahu's 10 years as headmistress at Nginda, you were particularly in charge of Kaara's home. You made it work. Wahu taught you about politics while you and Grace, Wahu's deputy headmistress, discussed the day's events over a cup of tea at the table. You shielded Wahu and Kaara from the roaming special branch by informing them, among other things, that Wara was away at work when you knew he had fed the country. I appreciate you sharing your experiences. Grace, Wahu's deputy headmistress at Nginda Girls, you did your job as Mrs. Kaara's deputy, but by aiding her with in her duties and learning from her. Your important insights on the kind of pressure and abuse Wahu faced as a result of the special branch frequent visits to her home were critical in presenting Wahu's story around this time. We discovered Wahu's bravery, and I learned through you that she never disclosed Kaara's whereabouts or denied being Kaara's spouse. I appreciate all the information you shared. Lee Brownhill, this is Wahu's good friend abroad. If anyone asked me a challenging question while researching for this book, it was you. You asked me why I selected to undertake this study and write about Wahu. Thank you for agreeing to have a Skype conversation. Our engagement informed the composition of my chapter, The Journey. which is the introductory chapter of this book. Uncle Mwagi, who also passed a couple of years back, whom I interviewed at his home in Tongaren. Your memories of young Wahu growing up in Bayete were invaluable. I need to give a shout to three special people to me in terms of carrying out research. These people will really help me in transcribing the interviews. Fionn, Joseph, and Charlie. I know this process enriched your lives in different ways. However, special mention to Charlie, who agreed to read the chapter drafts. I cannot thank you enough for your attention to this. Faith, my editor, you have been there for me for many manuscripts that I've asked you to edit. You also agreed to edit this book. Thank you so much for your constant support. You must not run away because she said she's going to run away. I'm saying more is coming to edit. Barak, my publisher at Mvule African Global, thank you for accepting my work for publication. There is definitely more work coming. There are also several individuals who helped in one way or the other in the conceptualization and delivery of this book. Justice Dr. William Tunga, former Chief Justice and President of Kenya's Supreme Court, and Dr. Joyce Nyairo, former Program Officer in charge of Media and Culture at Ford Foundation. They supported the writing of the stories on Wahu and other women in a project we called Women in Public Spaces. Professor Wambui Kiai, you have been very helpful in ensuring that the finances for research were made accessible as soon as possible. Mushene, your effort in making those funds available was really commendable. I'm really, really grateful. A friend in Kisumu, a friend in Kilifi, two organizations in Nairobi financially supported me to put this lounge together. They have requested to remain anonymous. Thank you very much for your generosity. Tess is around. You made sure that the lounge, Dami, was ready long time ago. Thank you for handling the logistics for this occasion. Akoko Akech, I value the suggestions you provided me after reading this book. Mwalim Tom Odhiambo, I think most of you read a review of the book last Saturday. I do not have the right words to thank you for such an incisive review of the book. Asante sana, Mwalimu. Professor Jennifer Mushiri. Jennifer gave you the reason why I chose her. I taught Jennifer some time back with Ichungwa. Thanks for accepting to read the book and speak at this lounge. It is really an honor to have you here today. I will be remiss if I don't acknowledge my family. You have been involved in this research in spirit and many other ways. My daughter, Manya, I don't know if Manya has arrived. Thank you. My daughter is there. My daughter, Manya, kept asking about when I was completing the writing of the book. I greatly appreciate the reminders. That kept me going. My son, Enzo is there. You kept nudging me on in the journey. Son, You are the first person I read the first 2 paragraphs of chapter 2, and you remarked, "That reads well, Dad." And that was where I started the journey of writing this book. You were keen to know how far I was in completing the book. You also designed the cover of my book, and I appreciate you for that. My wife, Judy, you have given me support in my endeavors to research and write. You've listened to my ramblings, even when you want to sleep. Even before I began preparing the manuscript, you had the opportunity to listen to the recordings of my conversation with Wahu on Sunday as you prepared to go to church. You reckoned this will make a great story. I hope it is. I thank you for allowing me to use 3/4 of the dining table as my workstation for the last 4 years. You can now have it back. To you, Wahu, thank you so much for letting me write your story. We spent over 100 hours sitting in the iron roof structure at PCA Mutero Church in Karen, and our conversations were worth it. I hope I made you proud by telling this story. Now, to imagine that I can summarize Wahu's life story in this speech is to be ridiculous. However, I just want to highlight a few issues or a few points. First of all, how did the writing of this book come about? Now, I came to know Wahu through Zarina Patel, whose biography was published in 2014. While researching on Zarina, she asked me to interview Wahu as she thought Wahu could provide a refreshing perspective on her person and experience as an underground operative, as they both were actively engaged at the time. When I interviewed Wahu in 2012, and that's the first time I also met Kiama, I was impressed by the depth of information she provided of her interactions with Zarina, as well as her own experiences. I got more than I bargained because the discussion went beyond the interactions between two women. Wahu narrated a story of a wife of an underground operative she was also a quasi-operative in the underground, and her involvement in all those anti-Moi activities by association, but in real sense. The story she narrated was her own, and that really captivated me. I was indeed intrigued by her story, and I promised myself that when I would do or get the energy to write another story, I promised myself that would be the next story. After completing Zarina's biography, I invited Wahu and Nema and Sam, right? Nema and Sam came with Wahu. And I jokingly said, Wahu, you are next. Now, how that was going to happen, I didn't know. However, in October 2016, Wahu phoned to tell me that she had toyed with this idea of writing her story and that she wanted my advice on how she could do it. I intimated that for a start, she could randomly put down her life experiences on paper, maybe tape herself, and at some point we could put these ideas together. Before long, a week later actually, she called me. Without missing her words, She said, "You are the one who's going to write the story." I accepted the challenge, but indicated to her that I needed to prepare myself mentally and also to source some funding. It was not until June 2017 that I visited her office at Zambia in Ngong that we began the journey of planning the research and documenting this biography. Although Wahu is the focus of this story, I sought to make it about a family, a synthesis of people's interactions and experiences with Wahu. It is a story about a family with multiple challenges that Wahu was part of and one that she fought to unite. In this first context, the word family should be understood in its traditional sense. In another sense, she is the embodiment of the larger family of people who have encountered her and have both shaped and been shaped by these encounters. The public Wahu is the one who afterwards marinates, species, and once again infuses her being into people's lives. Wahu then brings two spaces together, the public and the private. With her, into all these settings, the workplace, the church, the civil society struggles, etc. As a result, Wahu, in my view, is a sweet gourmet to savor in combination. One thing that stands out about Wahu is her relentless struggle for social and economic justice. She knew that this fight could not be won by throwing mere mud on the capitalist world. Wahu was aware of the unequal relationship between the global North and the global South, but she prepared herself to move beyond sloganeering and loft wording spilling in countering this arrangement. She also understood that we must combat global capitalist exploitative structures together, where sometimes she differed with her friends on her conceptualization of how to tackle capitalism. Nonetheless, she was very clear that it is this invisible hand, the international capitalist system that prevents individuals from this global South from being human. Overall, her character and all of her endeavors were motivated by a desire for a better life for everyone, which she refers to as human dignity. She has thus fought for people to have the right to be human, whether by speaking at the WSSD and UN conferences, addressing a meeting in Glasgow, Scotland, and numerous World Social Forum processes in Port Alegre and Nairobi, or through her debt campaigns with Kenya Debt Relief Network. She believes that the enjoyment of human dignity by a sovereign people must be core. It must be core to their struggle against exploitative capitalist system. She has lived this struggle of seeking an alternative system that allows everyone to live a decent and dignified life and live life in abundance. Wahu is one of the few people to articulate the idea of spiritedness. And that is where the title of this book comes from. Spiritedness in Wahu's world is the search for purpose in human endeavors a move to address the individualistic construct of society or its material manifestations, a reversing of a value system that restores connectivity in human life, what she refers to as spiritual connectedness. In this way, she believes we begin to debunk the struggle to steal, the struggle to loot, the struggle to self-praise, the struggle to court gesture, which is become commonplace today. She seeks, therefore, a new spirituality. Wahu seeks a new spirituality beyond the contradictions associated with neocolonialism systems and control domains. She therefore invites us to join her journey, a call to life, and not to be slaves for profit, but to live for Africa and not die for Africa. Wahu is urging us all to embrace this spirit, the rebirth of a thriving, inclusive society where humanness serves as the driving force and human connectedness as its foundation. As I conclude, I need everyone in this hall to remember that even though we can claim Wahu as ours, and indeed she's Wanjiku's, she's Kiama's, she's Maura's, Ngoto's, Karanja's, she is a life shepherd to Uncle Mike and Jenga. She's a political mentor to Beth, a great teacher to the Nida girls, a prayer warrior for our friends at the Mutero PCA Church in Karen. But I want to agree with Wahu's mother, who, upon reflecting on Wahu's endeavor to serve in public office by running for election in 2007 and garnered considerable votes, she told Wahu that, my daughter, you belong to the world. To that I say forever and ever and every day. This is because Wahu embodies the true spirit of the world, what must be a spirited world in which spirituality and connectedness is core to our existence. I am certain that I have presented the story in this book as fully possible as possible, and in a way that makes it understandable. Any errors or inconsistencies in the book are my fault. In addition to honoring my nephew, Raphael Gona, also known as Jomba, I think my students thought Jomba was his name, I dedicate this book to my son, Henzo, and daughter, Manya. Thank you very much. It is my single duty at this point to invite our guest speaker, Honorable Yusuf Hassan, to give his remarks. Honorable Hassan is the Member of Parliament for Kamukunji in Nairobi. He's one of the progressive parliamentarians and a forthright individual who is keen on serving his constituents with dedication and humility. A true servant of the people of Kamukunji. Please join me in welcoming Honorable Hassan to speak to us.
Bring it closer. Mheshimiwa, welcome. One last thing that Dr. Gona did not say is that, and this is important, Mheshimiwa is a student in this great university doing his PhD in the Department of Diplomacy and International Relations. And as the man in charge of postgraduate studies, I can confirm that is making very steady progress towards the finish. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Let me acknowledge the presence of Her Excellency, the Ambassador of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. I also want to acknowledge the distinguished professors, starting with the Professor Odhiambo, who is the Dean, my friend, Professor Obongi, who has introduced me. I think many people would say the man is just too old to be studying or doing a degree at this moment. He should do something more worthwhile with his life. I also want to acknowledge Professor Ngodo, Karaoke, and last but not least, I also want to acknowledge my former parliamentary colleague and the former governor of Laikipia, Mheshimiwa Ndiritu Morevi, and many others whom I haven't acknowledged. I would say typically the Kenyan word for that, I think all protocols observed, is a Kenyan copyright or a trademark. I must say I'm delighted to be here because and participate in the launch of this particular book. I think a lot of people may wonder how I get into this particular role, not only as the Member of Parliament for Kamukunji, because that is just the last part of my life. I've been involved in the struggle for change in our country for many years. And I was a founder member of the Committee for the Release of Political Prisoners during the dark days of the Moi Kanu regime. I was also the first chairman of Kenya, which was the movement for democracy and unity, the first political party to challenge the Moi Kanu regime. But we were in exile. We were giving support to the struggles that were going on at that moment in our country. And finally, also, I'm also a founder member of Umoja, which later was the more or less the external wing of Mwakenya, with many other comrades. And perhaps as we go through this presentation, you would clearly understand the linkages that we have, because our country has been a country of resistance throughout its history, from the old days of the Swahili Coast, where there were struggles against foreign intruders and invaders. And in fact, if you remember that that period, the Kenyan coastal people defeated the Portuguese in the 15th, 16th century, when Portugal was a major European power, more or less like the role of what America is at the moment in the world. And we have a long chain of freedom fighters, resistors, from the arrival of the British colonial system on our shores until much later when we attained our independence. I would say Spirited narrates the life and times of Wahu Kaara. It is authored by the historian George Gona, whom we listen to, a scholar from the University of Nairobi. The book excels in researching and meticulously documenting Wahu's life, as well as that of her family during an extraordinary era in Kenya's history. In his foreword to the book, Professor Edward Oyugi notes that the book provides a broad canvas of the earth-shaking aspects of Kenya's colonial and post-colonial history through the turbulent life of Wahu Kaara. It offers a kaleidoscopic view of the incredible rich life of this extraordinary woman. And I want to connect the biography and the life of Wahu with and indicate the historical significance of it, because her life is inextricably linked to some of the most important developments in Kenya's political history, from the emergence of the Mau Mau to the independence of Kenya in 1963, the rise of various reactionary elites and repressive governments, which subsequently sparked growing resistance, and an increased agitation for democracy, human rights, equity, and social justice. Her life story and struggles connects periods and stages in Kenya's people's resistance to imperialism, because she lived during the colonial period, during the Mau Mau, and new colonialism, and also through the many political movements we've had, including the Kenya People's Union. And I'll say that from the very beginning, our country took a very wrong direction from the one that was anticipated by the great masses of this country. Because at the very beginning, when we were about to take off, some of the political conflicts and divisions that we have seen since then emerged with the break between the two factions of KANU, the killing of Pio da Gama Pinto in 1965, and the expulsion of progressive elements, including the Vice President Jaramogi Oginga Odinga and Bildad Kagea. When they regrouped to form KPU in 1966, Kenyatta and his associates launched a series of repressive actions, including the detention of Odinga, the arbitrary changing of the constitution, the curtailing of fundamental democratic rights, the banning of KPU, and Kenya becoming a one-party dictatorship. So this is, in a nutshell, the beginning of our problems, if you look now, some of it. And then eventually there were other political parties. This is much later under the Moi regime, the December 12 movement, Ukenya, Umoja Mwa Kenya, Ford Kenya, and the second liberation that led to the defeat of the Moi KANU dictatorship, and of course the rise of new youth voices, the generation leap that we have seen or witnessed recently, culminating in the Gen Z uprising of June and July this year, which has shaken the Kenyan establishment with its foundation and rekindled hope in the efficacy and the legitimacy of the protracted campaign for a true liberation and the birth of a new Kenya. As fate would have it, and as we have had several times, Mama Wahu was born just 4 days before the British government's proclamation of state of emergency on the 20th of October 1952, aimed at countering the Mau Mau War of Independence. And I like to emphasize here, because I think there might be some revisionist historians, that the Kenya Land Freedom Movement was a wholly Kenyan movement, a national liberation project. The British colonial government at that time unleashed a reign of terror against the civilian population, leading to the incarceration of almost the entire Kikuyu nation, mass killings, rape, torture, forced displacement on an unparalleled scale in Kenya's colonial history. They imposed a scorched earth policy designed to erase all possible resistance by the Mau Mau. They also carried out a collective punishment process through forced villageization, which began with the entire villages set ablaze, razed to the ground. The farms and the cattle were decimated and taken, so that by the end of the uprising, they had been reduced to the people of central Kenya had been reduced to an impoverished people. An estimated 1 million men, women, and children were rounded up and herded into 845 barbed wire protected villages between June 1954 and October 1955. This is, in fact, 3/4 of the entire Kikuyu population of 1.5 million who were put into concentration camps. This history is not well known because I think, as you know, there have been elements and administrations that have not wanted this particular history to be taught in our schools and to be learned by our children. But this is the life and the condition in which Wahu and her family and how her community grew up. And book is important in the sense that it links us from that Mau Mau struggle to the other struggles that we've had in our country as a people. And in that 1954, the British colonial authorities extended their repressive policies to the Rift Valley region with a screening campaign, deporting thousands of Kikuyu people, imprisoning many others. The quiet life of Wahu's family in Eldoret was seriously disrupted and turned upside down. They became direct victims of the colonial government's repressive policies. Several members of her family, including her uncle, his wife, and her grandfather, were detained. Her grandmother and 3 of her uncles were deported to Kiambu, while her other uncle and his wife were held at Kamiti prison until 1959. An estimated 150,000 Kikuyu squatters on white settler farms in the Rift Valley were deported to central Kenya. I have a very strong empathy with this particular struggle, and particularly the Mau Mau and the terrible atrocities against the Kikuyu community because of my own history and background as a member of the Somali community, which after independence in 1963 suffered unspeakable atrocities after the new Kenyan government unleashed a brutal war machine without mercy against pastoralists of northern Kenya, a collective punishment similar to the one that was meted out to the Kikuyu people. The same forces, colonial forces, were then sent to northern Kenya to savagely attack women and children. It is these tragic events of the Mau Mau that has shaped her life, the life of Wahu, her character and personality. Although she grew up in a comfortable middle-class home, she resisted the benefits she enjoyed as a daughter of a wealthy family. She believed she was undeserving of these privileges and wanted to be relieved of the burden. At a young age, she became rebellious, defying her father, breaking away from the suffocating patriarchal order in her community, pursuing her own political path, and allying herself with the cause of ordinary Kenyans. Wahu was raised among people who were squatters on white settler farms. She experienced at first hand the terrible iniquities of racism, the horrendous injustices of colonialism from a young age. After independence, despite her family's fortunes rapidly improving from peasantry to squatter to petty bourgeois status, Wahu remained acutely aware of her social and economic environment and her early upbringing as a squatter. She increasingly rejected her father's growing bourgeois lifestyle and capitalist mindset, choosing instead to live modestly. She made conscious decisions about the type of schools she wanted to attend, the friends she made, and the choices she made about who she wanted to be as a person. For example, she refused to go to the most coveted school in Eldoret, the Highland School, the former all-white girls' school in town, which was the choice of her father. He struggled to understand why his rebellious daughter would turn down the opportunity to attend Highlands, the school every girl from Eldoret's wealthy families aspired to be. Wahu, however, had a different perspective and did not wish to attend a predominantly white school with only a few black girls from wealthy families. To her father's shock, she instead opted for a local public school known as Kakenda Girls Secondary School, and later went similarly to a public high school. So from a very young age, you can always see the fire that was coming. The troublesome, restless young woman, conscientized, developing into a resilient, tenacious, committed activist, an indomitable champion for equality, equity, and social justice. And we see her making waves as she arrives at the Kenyatta University College in 1974 to study for a degree in education and solidifying her beliefs. She enters college during a time of political ferment and change, conceding with the rise of a new generation of young and progressive scholars. Again, according to Professor Oyugi, one of her tutors, Kenyatta University attracted a group of progressive academics, or red professors, as they were sometimes referred to, turning the new university into an icon of progressive academia and radical scholarship. This was an interesting time when left-leaning scholars like Maina wa Kinyati, Kamonji Wachira, Ngugi wa Thiong'o, Apollo Njonjo, Audi Awiti, Willy Mutunga, Ngugi wa Miri, James Murioki, and Alamin Mazrui, among others, had introduced progressive ideas and literature into the university, worked closely with left-wing students and the student union to radicalize and steer its leadership toward a progressive agenda. So this was quite an exciting period in our student university history. It was here that Wahu was identified as a promising revolutionary activist, taken under the tutelage of Professor Maina wa Kinyati, a leading member of the December 12 movement and our history tutor. In later years, I had the privilege and honor of working with Professor Maina, the preeminent Mau Mau historian. And when we were both forced into exile by the Moi Kanu dictatorship, I went to the United Kingdom and he ended up in the United States after serving a prison sentence here in Kenya for his political activism. And we were able to launch at the beginning the movement of for unity and democracy in Kenya, Ukenya, in 1986, and then the United Movement for Democracy in Kenya, Umoja, in 1987. And I think I have learned a lot, and most of the quotes on numbers and figures that I give from on the Mau Mau and the atrocities of the British come from this really determined progressive historian. Wahu was also at university at difficult times when the popular politician J.M. Kariuki was murdered. The former Mau Mau detainee was a much-loved politician, an outspoken advocate for the poor and marginalized. He was one of the earliest MPs to speak out against the glaring inequities in our country and the growing gap between the haves and have-nots, illustrated by his famous quote that Kenya had become a nation of 10 millionaires and 10 million beggars. His murder plunged the country into a political crisis, sparking a protest in Nairobi, and during his funeral, students took over the proceedings to voice their dissent. Alongside a group of other radical students, I learned from this book, included her future husband, Kaara Macharia, and Chitechi Osunduo, whom I am told is present with us here, a historical figure, who became actively engaged in campus politics, taking on the students' union's leadership and openly opposing the university administration and the government. At Kenyatta University, she was introduced to the thoughts of Marx, Lenin, and Mao, and read about the French, Russian, and the Cuban revolutions, increasingly moving away from the dominant Eurocentric thinking that prevailed in our institutions and more towards an Afrocentric perspective. Her teaching and social and political experiences at university had completely transformed her and had a big impact. By 1977, when she graduated, she was ready to be a change agent. And this is, again, a very momentous period because shortly after, Jomo Kenyatta dies and Moi ascends to power. And our country descends into a period of repression, human rights violation, and economic decay and economic crisis. This was perhaps the most challenging period after the devastating effects of the War of Independence. It was followed by the coup of 1982, severe restriction of the democratic space that we had, particularly at the universities, the detention of professors and academics, the restriction of freedom of expression, freedom of academia, the banning of the political parties and leaving KANU as the dominant and only political party. At that period also happened some of the worst massacres in our country, the worst massacres in independent Kenya. It includes the Wajir Wagala massacre, in which 5,000 people were killed, the Garissa massacres. This was a period of political upheaval in our country. And it's here our lives connect again. And I come across a number of the Kenyan activists who were involved in the anti-Moi campaign. And we come together here as a political movement, although I was in exile. And Kaara Macharia becomes a leading underground activist in our movement. He is forced to go into exile, and Wahu is left alone with the children, and she becomes the head of the family and a very strong activist in her own right against the Moi regime. It is this period that we formed the Committee for the Release of Political Prisoners. We formed Kenya, we formed Umoja, we formed Mwakenya, with many, many other like-minded Kenyan activists and progressives. And here again, the life of Wahu is strongly linked to our political struggle and our political fight for a different Kenya. And over that period, as though she was teaching in different parts in schools in central Kenya, up to the end in which she was expelled, removed from our school back to Nairobi, she has been a strong activist in the underground political movements. And when we defeated the Moi KANU regime and we established multipartyism and democracy, she became again an active politician, activist, I would say, overground political activist, and engaged in political change up to 2007, running as a parliamentary candidate in the Serehe constituency. So I want to celebrate this wonderful Kenyan woman who has played very important roles in our society. And I also think that now we can link up with the message of our youngsters. And as you remember, in May, June, July, we had the 2024 Gen Z uprising, which is a linkage, if you look at with the other struggles. The Gen Z uprising was the first of its kind, a new and more sophisticated form of resistance. It differed from the past and from our struggles due to its multi-ethnic and national outlook, as well as its ability to organize simultaneously across many towns and cities in Kenya. It was also led by a new generation of activists, young, more educated, and more digitally savvy. Their message resonated with all Kenyans across ethnic, class, and religious divides. They were seeking, just like all of us, a serious, ethical, authentic, and values-driven and a dynamic leadership in our country, a leadership that has been lacking. So the Gen Z uprising, therefore, represents a generational leap, a new and more dynamic phase in our history of resistance and struggle, from the Mau Mau to the political organizations that rose against the Kenyatta, Moi, KANU regimes, giving birth to our second liberation, including Wahu and myself, who were veterans of those past struggles. The Gen Z June and July 2024 revolt pushed this country into a revolutionary situation. There's absolutely no doubt that our country is ripe for change, either a peaceful democratic change or a violent revolution. This is a choice that I think the Kenyan people need to make, because without a major engagement with our young people, guiding them to the ability to sort of create their own organizations, their own movements, we will not be able to achieve our dreams. There is, at the moment, among some of us, there's a robust and interesting debate taking place, particularly on the Kenya Left Alliance social page, which has been provoked by the Gen Z uprising and the idea of a tribalist, leaderless movement, which has elicited some provoking comments from some of the leading thinkers on the left, including Buka Omole, Ogwenyo Duor, Njuki, Okoth Osewa, and Moki Wambunga. And this is a critique. There are a lot of people who are critiquing and criticizing one of our leading political leaders and activists, Raila Odinga. The question is whether we can achieve a major change in our society for the better without a movement, without a major movement, without a major political movement. And I think the answer is that we cannot. Quoting Amilcar Cabral, the Cape Verdean, Guinea-Bissauan revolutionary leader, who said, we are not going to eliminate imperialism by shouting insults at it. And therefore, at the same time, we're not going to eliminate repression, neocolonialism, or repressive governments by shouting at them. We need people-based, people-centered, broader organizations. And I think this is a struggle our sister has been involved all these years. And I want to say that we cherish and appreciate the role that you have played in our struggle, navigating a society filled with injustice. You have emerged as a strong advocate for democracy, human rights, equity, and social justice. Your voice has grown into a powerful call for change that cannot be ignored. You have taken very strong positions on our need for liberation, our need for equality, and our need for justice. You have embraced your role as an activist wholeheartedly, standing up for the rights of the marginalized, supporting those who dare to dream of a better future. Your legacy is woven into the fabric of our nation, and reminding us the struggle for justice is ongoing, and that each one of us has a role to play. Your strong belief in the power of collective action continues to inspire new generations of leaders, including the Gen Zs. So I want to recognize and celebrate you. And I thank you for giving us your story for future generations. I thank you and all the best. I can't. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for appreciating Mheshimiwa Yusuf for that extremely eye-opening presentation. We are coming to the end of our program this evening, but before we do that, just a few things. Thank you, Dr. Gona, for your equally important and significant presentation, giving an approach that will make us understand and critique your thoughts in the spirited. And I hope that the section of your table at home, Sister Judy, the 2/3 of the dining table can be handed officially back to you in some ceremony where I might end up coming with my friend Kaara, the son of Mama here. I met Kaara some years back in Collins Hotel in Uganda. And Mami, I won't tell you how happy we were for 1 week together, because Kiama has also promised that he will not tell my mother So that's very good. So Judy, we offer to be guests and hand over the table officially to you. And Dr. Gona, thanks. And looks like you went all the way to Tongarang. And I wonder whether you interviewed Yesu wa Tongarang. You will have to tell us why if you didn't. And Mheshimiwa Yusuf, very good point that Wahu's story is actually the story of Kenya's struggle for an open, just, and fair society. Thank you, Mheshimiwa. That is important. And we still need that. And therefore, Aluta, continue. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I now have the pleasure to invite Mheshimiwa Yusuf to come here with Mheshimiwa Kibachia, my colleague Jennifer, and yes, and Mama, please, and Your Excellency, so that Mheshimiwa, our chief guest, can help us launch the book. Just here, where this dummy is. And Mr. Kipachio, just help us to know what we need to do here, kindly. Just please come up, Your Excellency. Yeah, Dr. Gona. Yeah, Mheshimiwa, just move closer. Mr. Kipachia is the key person here. Your Excellency, move closer. And those who know how to sing, to relate and do all those nice things, the ladies in the house, I hope you are there with me. Akina mama mpo? Okay, ndio hiyo. Mambo ndio haya sasa. Yes, just yeah, just touch where Kipachia is telling us and lift it up, and let's clap for that and make cheerful noise. There you are. That's it. Thank you. Thank you. Much appreciated. Thank you so much. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the book is officially launched. Those who need autographed copies, you can see us slightly later. Dr. Gona will be here, Mama will be here, and many more of us to do the needful. Thank you, and our guests kindly request that we take our seats. Sirs. To Jesus, the love is wonderful love. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Please resume your seats kindly. We are finishing. Friends, now I have the pleasure, with a lot of humility, to welcome Dr. Wanjiku Kaara to give us a vote of thanks. And we will have one more last speaker at the end. I will invite Reverend Gladys Mwangi, who will give us just a word and the final prayer, and also pray for the snacks and the tea, coffee, and the juice that has been specially prepared for you as our guests. So, Dr. Kaara, please take the podium.
Good evening. All protocols observed. I thought I was not the one who's going to give this vote of thanks. I thought it was Kaara who was going to do it. It's a pleasure to be at this book launch. Mom, as a medical doctor and as a pain specialist, it's apparently that my specialty comes from, I think, my background. I am actually very able to listen to my patients in a very interesting way. They find it very difficult to understand how a medical doctor could be in a position to communicate. Kwa hivyo pongezi sana mamangu, ninashukuru sana, umetulea vizuri. Kwa kweli mapambano umepambana ni kwa kweli. As the honorable, your struggle has been not only spirited as a mom, but also you made us learn 3-dimension thinking. My brothers can testify to that. 3 dimensions thinking was the policy of my mother in her house, that you must think in 3 perspectives. You must be here, you must be there, and you must be on the other side. So I'm very excited to see this book launch. I'm very excited to tell her story. This is what my brother the other day taught me, a lawyer, and told me this is what is called the proof of concept. The proof of concept is the ability to actualize, to be able to tell us exactly what have you been doing in your life. It's amazing that even as an intensivist, I can tell a patient how they lived their life and where they will be going. Either you'll be going to hell or you'll be going to heaven. I can actually tell where you will be. So the proof of concept is part and parcel of a medical treatment. It is part and parcel of why you come and see us in the hospital. You come to tell us about your physical pain. But when I look through, I can tell your psychosocial pain. I can tell about your, what else? Your spirit pain. I can actually tell about your spirit pain. And I can tell about your psycho-economic pain. You understand? So it is very important. I'm very honored to actually see that it is possible to live the proof and the concept of life. And that is part and parcel as to why we become healthy or we become unhealthy. So it is still part of social justice. So the apple doesn't still fall far away from the tree. So I'm grateful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wanshiko, for those thoughts. From me, I just want to thank this great family. You have graciously agreed to share your mother with us. Thank you so much, and we appreciate you, and thank you for being there for her. She means a lot to many of us out here, and that is because you have permitted it to happen. So we owe it to you. Thank you very much. So, Reverend, just come and tell us whether we have qualified to go to heaven. And then you pray, bless the tea, and then we can end it there.
Wow, God is good, and all the time, and especially now, as we celebrate this great woman, Wahu, Kaara, congratulations. Let me introduce myself. My name's Reverend Gladys Nganga, not Mwangi. I just wanted to make that correction. And yes, I serve the Lord at the Presbyterian Church of East Africa, attached to Kenyatta University Teaching and Referral Hospital, Research and Referral Hospital as a chaplain. And I join this community of the day to, yes, celebrate a life well lived of Wahu Kaara. Her story is inspired, is a great story to listen to and to read about, and it inspires us not to give up in a just cause. I want to appreciate our guest speaker, Honorable Yusuf Haji, for taking Hassan Haji, sorry, Yusuf Hassan, yes, for taking us through the story from her birth to where we are today as a country. You have actually joined history to where we are today as a country, as you have brought in the rise of Gen Z, giving us a picture that we have a task in our hands to continue seeking and even building a society that will be fair to all of us. And even so, as you have noted, that we need to work together. We're not alone. And therefore, I believe as we leave this place, we will work together, we hold hands and speak loudly that, yes, we are for a Kenya, a nation, a world that cares for one another. The book, Spirited, the title, inspired me as I actually am thankful for the interpretation of the word spirited. I was wondering, where is that one coming in? And it's the spirit of that lived in Wahu, Kaara. The Lord God himself, when he created us, he tells us he put his spirit in us, isn't it? We are created in the image of the Lord, and therefore his spirit lives in us. And we can see another face of the spirit of the Lord, a fighter, one who does not give up. And the word, and those words led me to the book of Exodus, Exodus 17, where the Lord spoke to Moses and told him, write these words down, that I will live to fight the Amalekites. It's a story where we read Joshua fighting in the battlefield with Moses and Aaron standing by, and their hands are lifted up. And the battle goes on. Somewhere Joshua says, let the sun stand still, that I may fight this battle to completion. And at the end of it, the Lord said, I will continue the battle to remove injustices or people who are not just in the society. Write it down for remembrance. And indeed, it continues in the hands of our very own Wahu Kaara. And she has now passed it on to us to continue as we are led by our members of parliament, our leaders in the society. So let's join hands, led by the Lord who has promised to go ahead of us. And I believe what we have learned today will be a great ground for us to fight for a society that appreciates love, kindness, and a society that appreciates one another. And before I finish and pray, I want to encourage a member of Parliament, Kamukuji, our guest of honor today. Why don't you write for us your stories? You share a great journey with Our Lady for the day. We would also love to learn about yours also. For indeed, in the society, in the country, you have contributed immensely. We appreciate you, the team, and may the Lord bless you and do you well as you continue to lead us as a country. Thank you, Dr. Gona. Thank you for that book. We shall read, and we know we shall be encouraged. Thank you for taking up that task. And now, I won't add much more because we have heard and we have learned. I would love for us to stand up so we can pray and thank the Lord for today. Let us pray. Our Lord and our God, this afternoon we stand in awe of who you are. Indeed, O Lord, you are the Lord of hosts, a fighter who goes ahead of us. Yet, you come to us as a father, a loving father at the end of the day. When the world was full of sin, you rose and raised fighters, and you stood by them, that justice, love, and mercy may manifest in the society amongst your people. And you promised you will continue. And to this day, dear Father, we stand to testify that you do continue. This afternoon, you have given us an opportunity to witness that in our lives today. Through the life of Wahu Kaara, we are grateful, dear God, for the journey she has been on. A journey only you, dear God, could have led and guided. Thank you for walking with her. Thank you for giving her a voice to speak when she needed to speak. It is true. So much has changed because she was there. She stood up courageously because, Lord, you are with her. Thank you for walking with her. Thank you for giving us an opportunity to hear her story today. Thank you for the many who walked with her, King of Glory. We want to appreciate your will that, Lord, you desire people to live well, to live in a society that is full of love and kindness. Thank you for the men and women, dear God, you used at a time when it was truly necessary. Thank you for preserving many who are with us today here. And Lord, we pray as they continue to lead us, as they continue to be with us, Lord, may their voice continue to be heard. That this society will be a society that you desired, even as you desired in the time of Joshua and Moses. A society of peace, a society of love, and a society that is just. We want to thank you for this occasion, dear God. Thank you for bringing us together. Thank you for giving us an opportunity just to celebrate thy guidance in the life of your people. We want to thank you even now that we have come to an end. Thank you even as we depart from this place, that you will go with us, guide us through, and protect us in our journeys. A cup of tea, dear Father, has been prepared. Bless it, O Lord, as we receive it. We pray this, trusting in you, O Lord God, our Father, and in Jesus Christ, our Lord and our Savior. Amen and amen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Reverend Gladys. Now, ladies and gentlemen, our tea is served in the open space out of this hall, and it is served by a Lachi restaurant from Skyward Mall in Parklands. And the proprietor is our good friend, Yogini Brabu. And I will ask Sister Judy, you can lead the guests to where the tea is being served, kindly. Yeah, and those who will want the copies of their books signed and autographed, please, it is going to be done outside where the tea is being served. So, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences of the University of Nairobi, I say bye and thank you.